All right, welcome back to the Theonomics shop. I'm working on the amphibious vehicle again. I got some idea what I'm gonna do with the frame. I'm gonna basically build a square or rectangle shape on the bottom and then attach the suspension points to that. Once that's done, then I can start forming the body shape and the seating positions and all that stuff. First up, we're gonna do the frame. So using 2x2 and it's 3/16 thick aluminum. Start with. We'll just start welding it together and you can see how it comes out. I have a little jig here, which I think is gonna work good. That's basically it. This goes right in here. That's the plan anyways. I think the measurements are about right. Kind of discovered a problem as I'm welding this together. These stands for the engine are they're too far apart from where the frame is going to be. So I basically have to weld the frame, set it on the table, and then take this down and set it on the frame, and then build the motor mounts so that the engine and transmission will be attached to the frame, and then I can set that back up into position, then attach the suspension components as we build them. I'm kind of figuring this out as I'm going. So the other problem I have is this welder, which is a Synchrowave 250DX Miller. When I'm welding this aluminum, it was the same problem with the transfer case. Because it's thick, it takes a lot of heat and a lot of amperage to get it to melt right. And I keep blowing my breaker out because this is just a garage in a residential area. It doesn't have three-phase power. I gotta figure that out because I gotta weld these things proper because they need to be strong. So just right now I'm tack welding everything together and it just setting the shape. Okay. I think that's about all I can do at the moment. The axle goes right under here and the drive shaft's going to come through here, and this is basically where the transmission starts over here. And this will be encased with aluminum because I think this will be wet area in here, so the seal will be right here, and then this will be all inside the boat. I basically have to unbolt this engine from these jack stands, set it on there, space it where I want it, and then build the motor mounts because this will be bolted directly to this. The problem is I can't seem to get these welded correctly. This welder is not holding up. It's just drawing too much amps to get these welded. So I'm gonna have to talk to the welding people. I think that's what they're called at one of the shops, or maybe even call Miller, and see what I can do to get this stuff welded. I might have to buy another welder or move to a different building, I don't know. But anyways, we'll keep you updated, and yeah, cool. Okay, so it's been a little bit since we were filming on this. I was building this frame here, and I realized I needed a pretty important tool, and that is this gantry crane because I needed to pick the engine up and set it on the newly built frame, but I didn't have any way to do that in here because you can't really get a forklift in here or a traditional engine crane. So that thing's going to be great for other projects I'm doing in here. I'm not sure why I didn't build that sooner, but since then I've set the engine on that frame and started working on mocking up the front suspension here. This is sort of going to be the ride height to the frame plus, you know, probably 8 inches underneath of that table surface. It's a pretty slow process, so didn't really have the camera running because there's a lot of thinking involved and not a lot of actual action. So I'm gonna go over it here now. So this is a triangulated A-arm I built. It's got heim joints on pretty much all of the ends here. And this is just a single connecting rod on either end. And there'll be a coilover somewhere in here on either side. Usually they'll run another bar that connects the axle into the frame, and that kind of rigid mounts it. But I think with this, I don't really need it. And being that this is a pretty lightweight vehicle, I think it'll be sufficient. But if not, we'll modify later. And this is a little half rack steering system I got. They usually run these in other vehicles, but it's open to whatever you put it in. And also today I'm going to be working on the back swing arm because that suspension still needs to be built. We'll kind of show you some of the process of that. Okay, so in the back we have a problem with the fact that this is a rim for, you know, a 4-wheel vehicle and it's only bolts in on one side. That would be okay. Sometimes you could do a single-sided swing arm, but it adds a lot more weight because you have to really bulk it up because it twists and stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm going to modify an original hub. This is basically the same thing that's on the front axle, and kind of make it so I have a shaft that goes through it, and then I'll have a dual-sided swing arm back here. And to do that, this is an original part off the front as well. So this kind of bolts on to the axle, and there's wheel bearings in this, so that kind of just slides in there, and that gives you the spinny part, and this is mounted fixed. So what I had to do is I'm going to take this part. I already built the piece here. This is just a piece of plate steel. I machined it out here and drilled and tapped it. So that will go on there. And then this part is for the brake caliper. So it's nice to be able to use that and save that so we don't have to re-engineer any of that. I made this piece up too. This is another just a piece of steel, but it slides in there. Before there would have been the 4-wheel drive axle would have gone through here, and then it would have attached onto the hub. I machined it down so it's so I can put a bolt through there. And the plan is to bolt that together, and then have this piece so that it will bolt on there, and it'll tie them both together solid. And that way, should I need to service it, it can all come apart. And there'll be 4 bolts holding the side pieces to what's sort of a start to the control arm here, so that I can undo those 4 bolts on either side, slide it out, and the rim will pull off. Yeah, so we'll just go through the process here and try to put this thing together. Okay, what I'm building here now is, this is just a piece of pipe. It's big enough so I can put a socket through it to get that bolt out. And this is a little flange that I made. So this will bolt to the outside of the control arms. And this is just a little spacer in between to connect the two. So I'm just making it so it's a tight fit. I had to machine it down slightly to fit this hole that I already drilled in it. So I'll press that in there. I also need to cap this side and just have one hole that is 3/4 inch so that I can put the bolt through it, and then it doesn't just go out the other side. So I need to basically machine this down a little flatter and get it to the right height, which is take like another 1/16 of an inch off of it. Kind of need to do this because I got to get this edge as flat as possible. I just cut it. Okay, that's good on that one right now. Let's do this one. So I need to take 1/16 of an inch off of that, roughly. I'm going to buff that real quick. Shine that up, because I'm going to attach that piece and weld it on here, tack weld it at least, because I can center it on this piece. So I'm going to clean this up a little bit. Okay, so I just shined up the area where I'm going to weld on the bench grinder. Got a scuff pad on that. So I'm going to try to get it somewhere in here, as close as I can. And then this thing, kind of want to find something that's going to center. Got a lot of options here. Give this a shot. Okay, I guess that's going to be good enough. Not sure if I can get a welder in there, but looks pretty good. And then basically that is going to go on there. Not good for the instrument. So I just tack welded it for now, just because things can change when you reassemble everything. Okay, so this is half of it. Kind of see how it's assembled now. I'll put this on. So then there's that part, which is where the bolt's going to go through. This bolt is obviously not long enough to reach through to the other side, so I'm going to have to find another bolt, which I don't know if I have, but I can press on regardless. It's a little too long, but it's going to have to work. Must be a little fatter than the other one. Well, whatever. So this is kind of the start of the control arm here. This is just a heim joint, and I welded on a little threaded piece here so that it can be adjusted. And I made this little plate, which that will bolt to. I'm gonna clean up the edges, round them down a little bit before this thing is done, but for now it doesn't really matter. And this will bolt onto here, and seem to have a problem. That's why you only tack weld stuff. Not sure I messed up that measurement, but I did. I was planning to have an inch gap here, but I'm missing the inch. I need to undo this piece, throw it away, and make another one, an inch longer. Dumb. So now I made this piece an inch longer, so we got exactly 1 inch of clearance between the swing arm and that. And now we're gonna start on the other side. I gotta basically mount this side. Got a pipe, which I'm gonna machine into there and weld that on there. And then I gotta cut this down and drill a hole in it, weld that on there so that the bolt can go through that, and bolt everything together. Basically, I got to figure out how this is going to get affixed to here, and then cut it to length so that the wheel is centered inside of the frame there. So I think we'll drill and machine this thing and then set it in here, or machine this and set this in there. We'll see. See which works better. Okay, so I can't, this thing is too short. I should have cut it longer. I can't really clamp it in there and cut it down. So I think I'm gonna maybe just sand it, get that rust off of there, and machine this down a little bit so that it fits in there. So back out. Okay, I think that'll press in. Okay, I'm gonna just bead weld it around the side and then I'll ream out the center. See if this one cuts any better. Okay, now you got a hole. I'm going to check to make sure that's not sticking out too far and interfering with anything. I need to add a seal on this shaft because the wheel bearings are right there and I don't want them getting wet. So I'm going to have to put an oil seal on there. And I have this old bolt pattern where they had the lockout hub, so I can make a little plate and add that seal in there. But it would be better if it was closer or easier. But the only way I can do that is if I get rid of that part sticking out. Because if I weld that, it's not going to be a smooth finish. I'm going to try to take about half of that off. And then weld it, and then see what we can do from there. Took off quite a bit. I'm going to try to put a little bead of weld in there, and then get my diameter or my measurement this way, because that'll be final length. Cool, that should be enough. Because it's pressed in there, it's not really going to go anywhere, and it's bolted on, but that thing's going to be hot for a while. Just let that cool and have a cookie. We want it 4 5/8. So we need to take off not that much. About 1/16 of an inch, but that's very hot. Okay, so I'm going to cut that down to 4 and just over a half, and then I got to countersink it so this slides on there, and then I can tack weld that on there. But first I got to cut this edge flat too. All right, let's see if we have our measurements right. Looks good. That one gets so tight. All right, so the bolt goes in like that, passes through this one, and then we'll bolt it together, and that will essentially lock that part of it. And then this goes on like so. So now I still got to make this part. I don't think I'm going to do that today for the seal to go into. And pretty much have to move on to the next stage, which is mounting it to this surface here. But to do that, I have to take this wheel off. So basically, the way I've been building this whole thing is I set a level surface, which is the table, and I'm kind of keeping everything parallel to that because it's a lot easier to fabricate when you have a flat surface. You know, you can just level stuff. So this will, like all the front control arms are going perfectly level, and the ride height I can determine or mount this one the same as that, the front, just by measuring off of the surface here to the center of the wheel. That way, when I take it off of this and put it on the ground, it'll be level. It won't be off center. But, which means this will go somewhere in this area, a lot heavier in the back than the front, but basically something like that. I still have to connect this part here. I'm going to reinforce all this, and then I'm going to tie it in here as well. But I can't really do any of that until I make this fender, which I don't know how to do yet. But, you know, I just made a swing arm out of an original hub. That's, yeah. Okay, so the second part of the rear suspension here, I did a little bit off camera. I added a bar in here on the swing arm so it locked it together. I got the bolt, so that got bolted together. And then I added these. Basically, these are going to be the main supports that are going to hold these brackets and hold the swing arm on. I'm still unsure exactly where I'm going to put the spring on this. It's the spring and shock, but we can keep moving forward. So these are some 1/2-inch plate aluminum I made. I'm going to attach them on here and then bolt the swing arm to that, and that should give us a wheelbase and a center line for our ride height, and then we can move on to the next step from there, which I'm not sure where that's going to take us, but let's do this for now. All the way up, all the way up. Okay, so I just tack welded these brackets on there for now. I'm kind of in the habit of just welding them all together. I've had to cut them and, you know, re-weld stuff on a couple times now already. I'm just going to try to tack weld them and then make sure they're good before we melt them in permanent. I think I'm going to add a couple pieces on the front, sort of get some idea where the coilovers are going to go here, because that's our next thing to figure out. All right, so this is just sort of a mock-up. There will be a spring on here as well. It's just a universal coilover. I think I'm going to put it somewhere in this area. I'm going to need to add some metal in here and sort of tie them both together, both sides, because when you have spring force coming in, you really need to tie it together so they can fight against each other and make it even more strong. And if you noticed, this has been redone slightly from the last time it was on camera. I wasn't totally happy with the geometry when it would come up, because this arm was a little shorter than this one. So I made them the same length. They're 18 inches long. And I mounted it underneath of it in the center so that when it comes up, it kind of comes up straight. It still twists a little bit, but you can't do anything about that. But I had to cut this off, change this bracket, so a lot of work. I'm gonna notch this out, but I can kind of have to do it with the hand grinder. All right, so the reason I switched over to this side instead of doing that side first is obviously the mount for the shock is going to go somewhere in here. So I'm going to trim this out a little bit. The wheel is going to stop about here. And there's going to be some spring on here, so it's going to get that a little bigger. Hey, I'm talking to the camera here. Anyways, there's also going to be a fender on here. And that is further going to interfere with it. So picking the position here is kind of difficult. And to further complicate it, I have to sit in here somewhere and my legs have to go somewhere. So there needs to be some pedals. So we kind of have to figure this all out at once. And also try to figure out where the shape of the boat is going to go. This is a pedal assembly I have, which I'm hoping I can use because I have it. I think if I put it somewhere in this area, with the seat here and the pedals here, it's not really that comfortable. But I can't go back with the seat anymore because there's an engine here. I go back a little bit. I could go lower with the pedals. I could be down here with my feet, but that's pretty tight. I could go up higher with the pedals, but you don't want to be higher than you're sitting. So I could raise the seat, or I could just get a different pedal assembly that mounts a little different. They have them so they mount below it. I think we're going to have to go over. That was kind of the plan, is to go over before and put the gas tanks in here, this hole here. There's just a lot going on here, very small space. And yeah, the only downside with going up is that you have to raise the seat up, which then raises the whole, ends up having a taller vehicle. Could be real ugly, yes. But I don't know if we got any choice in the matter. Oh, actually with this technique, with it higher, we could put a bench seat in it. Very exciting. The plan was to do a nice swooping roll cage. Goes up over my head here, which I don't think that's gonna work. It'll look like a Jefferson car. The Jetsons. Alright, no top, whatever. Maybe Roadster. All right, just gotta cut that. I'm gonna weld these guys. That's about all we can do in the front. Get some of this crap off the table. Well, I think that's about all I can think to do on this right now. That pretty much wraps up all I could do at the moment. I'm kind of need to figure out some things, like where these coilovers are going to mount, and most importantly where I'm going to sit, because everything is really squeezed in here. I think I probably if I were to do this over again, I would have made it a little bigger but I was limited with the length of my axle here. You know, I couldn't make that any wider. And that is kind of squeezing everything. So it's squeezing my feet and the coilovers and the fact that the axle turns. So the wheels are gonna sort of tuck in here closer. So I've got a lot to figure out before the next video, but in the next video I will have figured it all out. So stay tuned and we'll keep you updated.